Old Gilly Fraser, a Scotsman through and through, shifted beneath his heavy furs. A dream, horrid and unsettling, clung to him like morning mist. He saw a skeletal figure, gaunt and terrifying, with eyes that burned like hot coals from the depths of hell. The image faded as he opened his eyes to the darkness of his small cabin. The wind howled outside like a screaming ghost, haunted by a life lost. The fire had died down to embers, casting flickering shadows on the rough log walls. A chill, unnatural and deep, settled in his bones, a sharp contrast to the hellfire of his dream. In his heart he knew something was wrong. Gilly sat up, his breath a cloud in the freezing air. He reached for his tinderbox, its familiar weight usually a comfort. His fingers grasped at empty air. Panic, sharp and cold, cut through the remnants of sleep. The tinderbox was always kept in its place by the hearth. Always. He was a man of routine, a soldier even in his old age. Alas, an extinguished fire and a smashed cabin door were not in that routine. His hand trembled as he reached for his flintlock musket, the cold steel a small comfort in the growing darkness. Gilly rose, each movement stiff and painful as the last. He shuffled towards the hearth, his bare feet sinking into the cold dirt floor. The fire's last embers pulsed with a faint orange glow, revealing the overturned table and stool. Ashes from his broken pipe scattered like pepper on the snow-glazed cabin floor, the unmistakable scent of decay, sweet and nauseating, the putrid notes hung heavy in the air. It was a smell he knew well from the battlefields of his youth, the smell of death, of Fort Colonial. But this was different. This was something ancient, something that hunted. He ran a calloused hand over his grizzled chin, his mind racing. What could it have been? No animal could have broken through his sturdy door. No man would dare venture this far into the wilderness, not in this weather, not at night. A shiver ran down his spine, a primal fear he hadn't felt since the bloody days of the French and Indian War with the Black Watch. Back then it was the enemy he feared, the painted faces of hostile natives, the glint of steel, the fire of muskets and cannon. That was until he first encountered it. This fear was born of whispers and shadows, of ancient native legends whispered around campfires and dismissed as superstition. A monster that simply couldn't exist under the eyes of God, of a Christian world. But Gilly knew otherwise. He moved towards the fractured wooden door, each step slow and deliberate. His hand hovered over what was left of the crude iron latch, his heart pounding against his ribs. The French and Indian War had hardened him, forged him into a weapon of iron and will. But tonight, fear gnawed at his resolve, an old fear thought to be forgotten to the sands of time. He threw open the door, the frigid air biting at his face. The forest stood silent, the trees like gnarled sentinels, their snow-covered branches guarding a dark and terrible secret. The moon, a sliver of silver in the black sky, cast long, distorted shadows across the clearing. His eyes fell to the ground, his breath catching in his throat like sand to honey. There, etched in the freshly fallen snow, were tracks. Not the paw prints of wolves or the delicate tracks of deer, nor the feet of man. These were far too large, too powerful, hoof-like but twisted and wrong, like a grotesque mockery of nature itself. And they were stained crimson, the colour stark against the pristine white of the snow. The metallic scent of blood, heavy and cloying, reached him, confirming his worst fears. It had returned. The wind seemed to moan through the trees, carrying with it a sound that sent chills down his spine. A low, guttural howl, filled with a hunger that seemed to echo the emptiness of the winter night. It was a sound that spoke of madness and despair, a sound that could freeze the bravest heart. He knew then, with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that he was not alone. It was out there watching him from the safety of the trees, its eyes burning with an unholy light. Gilly raised his flintlock, its weight familiar and reassuring. He had faced death before, stared it in the face on countless battlefields. But this was different. This was an unholy creature born of darkness and legend, a predator that fed on fear and despair. He knew that lead and gunpowder would be of little use against such a creature, but he would face it nonetheless. He was a soldier, and a soldier never surrenders, not while breath still filled his lungs. With a deep breath, Gilly stepped out of the cabin into the darkness. The cold bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. His entire being was focused on the tracks in the snow, leading deeper into the dark and unforgiving wilderness. He knew the dangers of the forest, especially on a night like this, but fear was a luxury he could no longer afford. He had faced countless enemies in his lifetime, both man and beast. He would face this one too, and pray to the god he had long since abandoned that he would see the dawn. He followed the trail, his breath misting in the cold air, the crunch of his boots on the snow the only sound in the stillness. Each step took him further from the safety of his cabin, deeper into the belly of the beast, an unnatural magnetism pulling him further. The forest pressed in around him, the trees like skeletal fingers reaching out to claim him, their jagged branches scratching his skin as if thirsting for his blood. He could feel the presence of the creature, a weight on his chest, a chill that seeped into his bones. He knew that he was walking towards a confrontation, a battle against a creature as old as time itself, and as he walked, he prayed for the strength to face the terror that awaited for him, that beckoned him into the foreboding frozen abyss. Deep in his heart, though, the Scotsman knew this would be his final battle.